Greetings. Welcome to Soul Healing, the podcast. This is a podcast sponsored by Journey Healing Institute. I am your host, Dr. Kimberly J., spiritual scholar, educator, and holistic healing practitioner. And so, this is a sacred space where Black women reclaim our power to heal, thrive, experience sacred joy, and make meaning of our lives. And so each week we explore topics, concepts, ancestral wisdom, embodied spiritual practice, and transformative magic that happens when we make the conscious choice to do the real work, the real heavy lifting of healing our intergenerational wounds, of embodying a praxis of soul to soul healing. And so this week, I want to build upon our experience together. I have three of my sister scholars here with me in this space, and I want to build. We had the opportunity to be together to create bonds and connections amongst scholarship and knowledge and creativity and spirit and wisdom. And so I want to build upon that medicine that we were able to not only create but to receive in communion with our soul work at the 56th annual Association of Black Psychologists Convention. And so I had the fortune of being on a panel with Miss Drisana McDaniel and Medea Brooks. And our panel discussion was on the divinity, healing, and psychospiritual effects of Black mothering, Black motherhood, and Black mommy. And so in this presentation, in this panel presentation, I started off and I spoke to the power of conscious mothering, conscious remembering of our psychic, spiritual, and ancestral power of Black mommy going back in antiquity to understand the power, the role, and the divinity of Black motherhood. And then speaking to the remembering, the putting back together of our fragmented bodies, these fragmented bodies that have manifested as a result of colonization, as a result of enslavement, as a result of the incessant assault on Black women's bodies and our abilities to mother. And so, based upon my own personal lived experience as a single Black mama raising two young Black boys who are now adults, I use my story again to show the transformation of wounded mothering to conscious mothering as medicine and as an invocation for us to really unpack our own relationships to and with Black mother and motherhood. And then Drisana, who I have with me, she spoke to the power of alchemizing our mother wounds. And so the inherited pain, the abandonment, and turning that energy into energy of transformation for creativity and for building sacred relationships with our children and with our partners. And through her story, she shares how building mother-child relationships rooted in transparency and agency and liberation and truth and creativity and joy are foundational for intergenerational healing. And then Medea brought us on back home to the lineage of mothers and motherhood, the sacred lineages of our ancestors and the embodied wisdom and the medicine that they have passed down to us from generation to generation. And then she shared with us this beautiful, I mean, her history and her lineage runs so deep and it's so admirable because a lot of us Black folk here in America through the African diaspora, we we don't have those connections and those stories, or it's a lot of work to be able to trace back our mother lines to the extent that she has. And so I want to really thank my sister scholars for showing up in this space and for the opportunity for us to reflect on our experiences, because please believe it went beyond just us doing our presentation. We received so many spiritual downloads from our ancestors. We were graced with some being a part of some incredible presentations from healers, from wisdom teachers, from scholars. And so I just want us to kind of sit with our experience, to share our experience, and our how this coming together of these three Black women who are goddesses and scholars and activists and teachers and practitioners, and how that melding and that coming together created again like this incredible ball of medicine, not only for and at convention, but for and with us within our hearts. And it was medicine that I think we all needed. And so I want to begin. And so we'll just go through a few questions to kind of get the conversation going, and just leave space for spirit to take it where it needs to go. And so I'll start with you, Medea. If you could just share a little bit about yourself and about your work and what brought you to the convention.
I say gratitude. Good evening, good afternoon, much love. First and foremost, I want to honor Oya, the storm goddess who is crackling and about to start raining right now as we're doing this live. So that's direct because today is Oya's day anyway. My name is Medea Brooks. I am a 25-year veteran educator, Chicago, Philadelphia, but now I currently live in my ancestral home in Virginia that I inherited through my mother and great aunt. I currently work as the outreach coordinator for the African American History Project for the Louisa County Historical Society. I still work part time as a part-time teacher at the middle school there, and my work is really about embodied wisdom, ancestral information as I'm in this walk in my postgraduate work. So that's the long and the short. And what brought me to the conference is just another opportunity to share the unfolding and the gift and the sacredness of coming from an educator to the daughter niece that received this ancestral home, and listening to my ancestors so we can restore the home back to its original purpose, which is around love, education, family, and community. So that's me.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Medea. Thank you. And so now I would like to turn it to Drew.
What would you like? Can you ask the
So,
question again?
absolutely. So if you could share a little bit about yourself, your work, and what brought you to the convention.
Yeah. So let's see. So I'm actually a doctoral candidate at the California Institute of Medical Studies, where I am pursuing a PhD in philosophy and religion with a focus in women's spirituality. And my work is, I'd say, manifold. It's so many different things. I work with a few community organizations as a part of their team in terms of organizing. I do community organizing, and I also I spent a lot of time working with the Acosta Institute, where I work as their senior researcher, as well as curriculum designer. So I get to do a lot of different kinds of consultancy work across several different fields. I would say my primary work at this time of my life is writing. So I do a lot of writing. I'm actually working on my dissertation, but aside from that, I have a couple of chapters that have been published, and I write a lot about mothering as a sort of portal to spiritual awakening, as it has been for me. I also have a framework entitled The Alchemy of Now, which I use. I want to say it's a framework that I work with to empower people to think about how we turn towards the now with more intention. And that was actually born of my parenting experience. And then, as a master's, when I was in a master's program, I kind of realized that it was a framework. And so it's a framework that I use to support teams. It's a framework I use to support individuals. I just recently completed my first online course at the Acosta Institute with the Alchemy of Now, which I supported several of our fellows with. And so, yeah, that's, I guess I'd say, I always talk about myself being a mother, worker, scholar, practitioner. And I'd say that that's the bulk of what I do is study, work, parent, and write.
Yeah. And so what brought you to the convention?
Yeah, so, well, first it would be the invitation for, we all decided that, our work has resonance together. And so of course presenting for that. And then I would say, if I have to say like what really brought me there, I think it would be what I would end up taking away from it, which is still very much percolating in my system. And that is being able to be in a conference that is Black, a conference that is for us by us, a conference where I could actually sort of be in immersion with how African principles inform our work, right? Inform our work. And so that's what brought me to the conference, is really to just have that opportunity to be around folks, bear witness to the types of incredible scholarship as well as practices that various people are taking on. Yeah, I guess I'd say that's why. I could say more about what I took away from it, but I suppose we'll go into rounds.
Yeah, we will.
Sure.
And so just a little bit about what initially, because this is my third convention. The first time I attended the convention as a doctoral candidate. And at that time, I was given the opportunity to do a poster presentation about my work. And that was the first time that I had attended the convention. And I was completely in awe and blown away, as you said, of being in a space, an African-centered space that really centered the psychology of Blackness, that really dealt with a lot of the issues, the medicine that is pertinent or relevant for us and for our communities. And even doing the poster presentation, I felt like my work was really received, and my work centers healing historical and intergenerational trauma in Black women through embodied spiritualities. And at that time, I was had just completed gathering all the data for my dissertation. So I was kind of sharing at a high level what my study results bore forth. And so that was a really exciting experience. It was a little lonely because I am not a psychologist, and it's a very robust community of not just psychologists, but thinkers and healers and psychologists who have been doing this work for a lot longer than myself. And so the second time that I went back to the convention was last summer. And this time I had just finished my PhD. So I actually did a presentation on healing historical trauma through intergenerational joy, of creating and finding intergenerational joy. And I did a presentation to a full house, and I was just so excited. I was just in my element, because that was the first time and being a doctoral student, I did a lot of conferences, lots of conventions, but that was the first time that I had presented my work for the people who could receive my work. A room audience full of Black women, and I was surprised at all the Black men that showed up for that presentation. And so that was really nourishing for me at that time. And so I came back and I'm like, okay, the three of us did a presentation on Black motherhood, and mothering, for, I think it was the International Association of Mothers. And again, the audience was predominantly white women. And so I said, look, we need to do this for the Association of Black Psychologists. We need to do this in front of an audience of our people. And so that is what inspired me to gather us together and say, hey, let's present at the Association of Black Psychology. And however, we all have our kind of take on how the presentation. Well, I think the presentation I was phenomenal, but in honesty, I was a little disappointed at the turnout. We had probably maybe about 8 people in the room, but we presented first on the very first day where logistics were still being worked out. And I still think that when people hear Black mothering, motherhood, it's just like, oh, black mamas, like, oh, okay, I already know about motherhood. But the divinity of it, the scholarship, the reaching back, the reimagining, the transforming of our wounds into our medicine, that's the depth of our presentation that I would have liked more people to have been a part of. And so that brings me to my next question. So for you, and either one of you can go first this time, what were some of the highlights, your personal highlights for the convention? And it could be some of the presentations that you sat with. It could be our presentation. It could also be the behind the scenes, because we had a lot of behind the scenes going on. When you get 3 spiritualists together, a lot of shit happens, right? Mm-hmm. And so we was doing card readings and, all types of incredible stuff happening. And so, I'll start, since I went with Medea first last time, Drew. I'll toss it to you in terms of what were some of your highlights or magical moments during the convention.
Yeah, what stands out to me primarily, like I mean, I don't even know where to start, but what stands out to me first of all is, one of the things that really took my breath away was walking into a space where as soon as you walk in, the ancestors are revered in a very active way, not just, names on a plaque, but names on a table where each name took up a certain amount of space and really reminded me, well, not even reminded me, it was the first time seeing it. So really made me very clear just how much of a legacy the Association of Black Psychologists has, and also the active way of reverence with the candles and the flowers and all other things that folks brought to the table. So I'll say that first, because what strikes me about these gatherings is they were really, they were heavily punctuated with ritual. And so that stands out. That's one of the big standouts for me. The presentation, we went to that amazing presentation on grief. And I'm going to say my takeaway really was grief and Black love, more than just grief. And what I took away from that and why it stood out to me is because of the way that the work was accompanied with music and with image. And I think it's just, Yeah, just I paid a lot of attention to how people presented and how they organized their presentations. And that one was probably one of the most memorable, will be one of the most memorable for me, to be clear. The other thing that I'm never gonna, every single session we went to stood out to me for different reasons. The session that we went to on Black mothers and sons really stood out to me, primarily because there were so many people in there. And I thought, wow, like in contrast to our session, it's middle day, people are registered, but just the nature of the conversation that happened as the presentation was happening. Yeah, that really stood out to me. Another thing that stood out to me was the sound bath session that I went to. Been in plenty of sound baths, but that one was just really, really special. And also watching the way that this is a psychology conference, but there was so much soul everywhere. And I know that psyche means what, to breathe initially, I think maybe, or soul or breath. What is it?
Spirit.
Spirit.
Mhm.
Spirit. Yeah, which is so easy to forget because I think about a lot of ways that psychology is real problematic. But here it was very clear to me that folks were deeply in fidelity to what psychology is and was. And so with the sound bath, for example, I think a lot about how people were moved deeply and how we were able to process that together at a conference. And this is a bunch of, psychologists, right? Or practitioners, healing practitioners, but being able to really sit with how things made us feel and talk about it. I think that was really, really powerful. So those are some of the highlights. And then of course the finale. What moved me about the finale, I've been thinking about this. One was this recognition that the torch for the presidency was being passed from one Black woman to another. And the second is the drumming and the dancing, like the energy and the joy, the ritual again, like this sort of recognition, because I think that conferences in general can be like hella stoic, void of spirit, void of, and this was just the opposite. And that sort of energy is what made, I'd say, the learning easy to take in, if you will, on an embodied level, right? On an embodied level, on a spiritual level, as opposed to just like, let me take my notes and never look at them again. It really was all of that. Those elements helped to make what stood out to me stand out.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So Medea.
Gratitude. Can you state the question one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. So what were some of the highlights of the convention for you? Either the presenters, presentation, behind the scenes, what were some of the things that really resonated with you?
I'll say gratitude. One of the first highlights in all transparency is to be like the middle sister between two July Leos. Um, so like I was like, okay, that was such a blessing, and it felt, um, it really felt nurturing and empowering, and I felt um held in a way that was like, this gentle nudging around showing up for my work in a way that I feel like maybe it's the Virgo in me, but showing up more for my work. So that was the first highlight. And presenting with you all. I really like the way we flow and how our work piggybacks, and not even just piggybacks, but like embodies the goddess energy around cycles, right? And the restoration of things. The second, I would concur with Drew. The second highlight was definitely Dr. Mariah Cambone, her presentation, and it was entitled The Journey Back Reclaiming Purpose. and that was deeply impactful, especially because it was 2 to 3 days after my parents. It would have been their 52nd anniversary on July 20th, right?
Mm,
And so to bear witness to her presentation, which was about her coming back in this work, um, back to self, back to center, but back to her purpose as scholar, community elder after the transition of her husband was deeply meaningful because it mirrored everything I was raised on, from their love affair to being raised in cultural things from birth and presentations and organizations, and of course the music and her transparency and nakedness and the grief. One of the highlights in that talk was that, grief is cyclical. It's not stagnant and it's not linear. You don't arrive at one part and be like, oh, okay, I'm done. Like, it will keep coming back. But this whole thing about being held, so that was very supportive for me, and it really activated. Um, I felt my mother very strongly about, like, okay, you get to take your time, but you're returning to this PhD journey. You're at the end. So that was very, very, very powerful for me. Um, and then the other one was Dr. Anthony Williams. He's another PhD student from our PhD, MFA from CIS, Dr. Butterfly. His work was phenomenal.
phenomenal.
And
Hmm.
um, myth as methodology and the way in which he approached his work around, and I want to say it was around like queer black men, but in their story and how their beingness, like creating something creative, but their beingness and just the beingness of our community, not even a separation of who's queer and who's not queer. This is how it landed for me, but about black bodies, indigenous bodies having the power, fortitude, and validation to utilize, in his case, it was a comedic myth, and also employing like Fanon and there was so many people he like arts-based inquiry into telling the story. This whole thing about indigenous psychology, and I really enjoyed his work too because yes, he's talking about comedic mythology, but really centering people of color as indigenous to the world anyway. So that was really, really powerful. I had a great time in his presentation, and I really liked how he engaged us, the audience, in these creative processes in speaking about with his methodology and with his inquiry and alchemy, like between alchemy. So those were three of the highlights. And did we say we weren't supposed to say cons, were we? Or behind the scenes?
Uh, I didn't get that last part. You said what?
What was the next part we were
Oh,
supposed to
that's
respond?
it. Just yeah, your
Oh,
highlights.
okay. And the behind the scenes was, yeah, especially like Spirit was just showing up in such a way where, I mean, I got to wake up in the morning and go watch the sun come up and get into scripture, um, the passages my grandmother left me, and get into the reading. And I want to share that, if you all don't mind, around the highlights. So the day of our um, presentation, I did a reading, and part of the reading basically spoke to how our work, we were a sacred trifecta of liberation, manifestation, and wisdom. But it also provided, when I shared it with this technology, it provided us with this invocation. So may I read it aloud here?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. It says, so our work, this experience of who we be reflections, right? On the presence and essence of us. It says, may we be the vessels of memory and the messengers of vision. May our words plant seeds in fertile hearts. May we unbind what has been silenced and forgotten. May we May the light we carry illuminate paths yet unseen, as it was with our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers. So may it be to us. And I feel like that's what we experience in our time there together. So I'll pass it back to you. Thank
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree
you.
more, because for me the highlight, and so what I love to do is observe and just coach myself in being present in every moment. And the one thing that stood out for me was working. I primarily work by myself, and unless there's a Zoom call or something like that. And so I do a lot of writing, a lot of planning, a lot of posting, a lot of creating, and that creating tends to happen in isolation. And so for me, the highlight was being in community with the two of you, was waking up every morning and feeling held in this energetic container that was nourishing, that was celebratory, that was, like I said, last year I spoke on the embodiment of joy as medicine. And that is what I got to experience unapologetically throughout the conference. And so I've come into this place or this season in my life where the things that bring me joy might not necessarily be what other people consider joy, but being able to sit there and be in the presence, as Drew brought up, of the ancestors, of being reminded of ritual and ancestors in every step of the process, every presentation, opening with either libation or naming the ancestors, drumming, bringing in the ancestors, so that that other connection, that powerful connection that's indigenous to us. So being able to be reminded that you are not alone in this walk, in this journey, is the first thing. The second thing is the land. And so being able to create and have these connections on the ocean, you know, being able to go into mother water and cleanse and purify, and then having the ceremony to the ancestors be right there on the beach, and being able for us to enjoy the sun, you know, just to be outside, to have some cocktails, to talk all things spirit, all things love, all things relationship, all things drama, trauma, and the medicine behind it. And so those clandestine conversations that we were able to have. And so I had the opportunity to embody like this wholeness. You know, we talked about sex, we talked about love, we talked about wisdom, we talked about knowledge, we talked about the next steps, we talked about the presentations, we talked about grief, we talked. And so being able to have that connection um, with you all, you know, and even going to the different presentations with you all, breaking bread with you all, you know. And so that was the medicine that I needed, especially again, so many of us work in isolation, and we don't get that opportunity to really experience what joy means for us. And this was joyous for me. And so I thank you all for wanting to come to the convention. And
Yeah.
so my next question is, I want to build a little bit upon the title of the convention, and then if you can just share if there were any challenging moments that you had, and what that brought up, any dissension that you may have experienced. And so the title of the convention is returning to spirit, the essence of who we be. And so again, how did that did spirit show up for you, and if there were any challenging moments that you had during the convention that were a little either daunting or felt disconnected, or and so I'll send it back to you, Drew.
I was trying to see if I could write some notes on it, because for me, I feel like I'd have to recall them, but I'll just do what I've been doing, speaking from the hip. One of the things that occurred to me that was clear is in so many ways it was a remembering, and I think that is important, especially for those of us who are scholars, so to speak, in terms of thinking about what the PhD process feels like, which we know it's a very violent, I'm going to name it, in my opinion, it's very violent the way it's set up, in such a way where it seeks to require you to sort of articulate a thing that hasn't been articulated when there's nothing new under the sun. And having to do it on our own, especially when we're collectivist people, is it's violent, right? So one of the things that I sort of took away is that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
That I'm not alone. Look at all of these people out here doing this work and doing really meaningful things with it. And so there was a remembering in that I'm not alone. There was also this remembering of, this return to spirit piece, in that, the academy often favors the intellect and the cognitive. And this idea of returning to spirit is, in my opinion, it's not something that's taught out of us, but I think that in other spaces, it's often the last thing that matters, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of an afterthought. And I haven't been to, the conferences on mythology and, whatnot, but I just, in general, this way that spirit was always present, soul was always present. And I think it has to do with that's because of who we be. I think the title very aptly, conjured that, if you will, captured that. Mm-hmm. In terms of I'll tell you a little bit about some of the blights for me. And this is very personal too. I recognize I didn't go to an HBCU. I'm not a part of sorority, nor have I ever wanted to be. It's never been a desire of mine. So when there's a lot of celebration around that, I just remember, and here's the thing too, growing up military, the way that I did, I'm used to being a joiner. So being in spaces where I might not necessarily be a part of a particular club or group. So I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with the celebration around sorority, but I was struck at how even within groups, and I talk about this often, I talk about Atlanta being the place, there's 8,000 ways to be Black in Atlanta. You can find your crew no matter who you are, because everyone's from everywhere. Mm-hmm. That was something that I kind of noticed. I'm like, okay, so there's a multitude of ways to also show up in these spaces. There's a multitude of connections that people have in these spaces. And then another thing that showed up for me, because I'm never not aware of the fact that we live in a material world, was the garb. It was so beautiful and colorful and vibrant. And I remember thinking in my mind, that's so interesting. I don't have anything. I have no African garb at all. I thought that was really fascinating. It's kind of like going to church and seeing how it's like going to church and seeing how folks are really dressed up. I remember when I was raising my children very young, I was like, sorry, we can't go if I can't wear jeans. If my kids can't wear jeans, they wanted to get dressed up. So I do remember sort of noticing that as well. Oh, that's interesting that I feel like I don't really have the gear to be, representing for, I would say, the continent, not even a country. And what I took from that is how powerful and beautiful it is to be at a place that's steeped in African principles. But I also took from that the fact that Africa or African is part of who I am, that I'm so many more people than that. So, which is why I always say Black in general. I tend to identify more with that idea. So that was very clear for me too. If you will, similarities and differences were very clear to me. I think I'm naturally attuned to scan for those sorts of things. And
Mhm.
so just a coming away with like, oh, so this is how I be. And so maybe I'm leaving with the like the essence of who we be and recognizing that who I be is who I be and it's all good, right? It's still
Love
very much
that. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
right. Yeah, right now I'm writing a chapter on Black love and Akoma. So funny to me that these principles were there, right? So
Yeah.
even that, like the fact that I'm writing about Black love and Akoma, a notion that was really amplified by an American person in DC, right, about what Black love is. Um, so being able to see just how like those principles can show up all over the place in all kinds of ways, and you don't necessarily have to be garbed up, if you will, in the gear. So yeah, so that's really good for me to kind of have that sort of recognition of, how I am, who I am, especially at 48, and not really trying to necessarily change, but also how to like just embrace the connections as well, like the solidarity that's there without feeling compelled to like figure out how to do it all because it wouldn't be entirely me if I did. It would be performative. So
Yeah.
yeah, just that came up for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hmm.
So, what about you, Medea? When you think about the topic or the theme of the conference in terms of who we be and returning to spirit, what are your thoughts about that? And also, if there are any um, difficult moments. I don't like want to use the word difficult, but challenging.
I know. I don't even know if blight was the right word for me to use, but
Yeah.
you
Well, I must say, like the title is extremely apropos. And so what do I mean? I grew up in spaces like the conference, meaning coming out of South Jersey, North Philly, my parents, they were like the street that sat by the door, but they were very well read. They were involved in, well, my mother was especially, every kind of black organization, this is before he was African American in the 70s or 80s, black community and cultural organizations all my life. So that was very, very familiar. It felt familiar. Even in the way things were done, felt very black, if you understand what I mean.
Hmm.
In the beginning, it was sort of a challenge, but it happens. And it's sort of like the church thing too. Like, okay, this is how, and I wouldn't even say unfortunately anymore. This is how black and brown spaces are run,
Yeah.
right?
Look,
They
and,
look
and really quickly, wait, Medea had all the garb. She was fly. She was ready.
as they're training from Yvonne and them. But in terms of returning to who we be, in a way it looked aesthetically and stuff like that, yes, it felt that way. Spirit and people's souls were very, very present. And I must say, this was like, it was a beautiful thing, but it was also a challenge because my clairs did not turn off. What do I mean by my clairs? My clear sentient, my clear audience, stuff just
Okay.
dropping my head. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So everything was beautiful. I had a great time, but I also felt a lot of elders, I must say, and I'm gonna call them elders because they appear to be my mother and father's age, which is in the late 70s and mid 80s, right? I felt their pain.
Mm,
I felt it, and I can see it on how people were moving. Now,
mhm,
some people, elders, did better than others, and this
mm,
is just me having the gift to feel and then bear witness, not even only with my eyes, but with my eye, with like my whole vessel. And I felt like that was um it was challenging for me, if you will, because I felt people, primarily like I said, the elders, fear around fully embracing whatever spiritual medicine, however they do it, to heal themselves.
mhm.
Now, I don't know if that's a result of being baby boomers and being a part of the org, because mind you, the organization is 56 years old, so they've been a part. A lot of these elders have been, well, it appears to be that they've been a part of the organization for like 30, 40 plus years, from the beginning. So that was interesting, and I won't even say it was a challenge. I could see and feel, I could feel where people were, and then I also felt like this reluctance. in terms of our elders to fully embrace the very principles they was talking about. And what do I mean? Because if you was embracing them, you wouldn't be feeling the way you feeling. The energy coming off of you would be drastically different, which I did see in a few elders that was on they spry, happy, love and light, God body self. Another thing that wasn't a challenge, but it's the age gap. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful I got to see a lot of young people that I met from CIS and a lot of young people, young lady you met from another conference. So what do I mean by young? Like are they the early millennials, like the
Mm-hmm.
late 30s, mid 30s, late 30s people who were there? They were engaged. They were really like robust and excited, but there were very few people our age. What do I mean our age? The Generation Xers. I'm born in 73.
Mm-hmm.
You all are on either side of me, excuse me. And for me, that felt kind of hollow. Like, well, where are the people our age?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they here? Why aren't they presenting here? And not even just at this particular conference. I would say we see that phenomenon everywhere in churches, in community organizations, in
Mm-hmm.
in healing places. It's always like either the NAACP, all these civic organizations, either top heavy baby boomers, a few of us, and sometimes a few young people. But overall, I do feel like spirit was alive and well in several. Well, I wouldn't say in all of the presentations I went to. I can't speak for everybody else, but the way the itinerary was set up, they had I could see the spirit in people's titles, if you will. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I could see the spirit and the heart and the compassion and the fortitude and what people were bringing to the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, but other than that, I mean, I would concur with, and this is just me. I did go to a HBCU, North Carolina Central University, Eagle Pride. However, I'm not a Greek. And I went there for undergrad. So I do feel like as we move in this work and scholarship, I just feel like there's something people should be mindful about. Because even if people are Greek or go to a HBCU, we have. I think it's worth noting like what is that about?
Mm-hmm.
Still, after a certain point in your life, that you're still big enough that way. I'm not talking about the kids. I'm talking about the whole thing. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so, lastly, I got just two more questions. Um, the next question is really around your takeaway. Like if there was what you want to integrate going forward, either in your scholarship or either in your personal practice, kind of your takeaway, your aha moment of integration post convention. And for me, personally, it just validated. And so when we talk about presence, when we talk about essence, when we talk about spirit and the returning and the calling forth, this is my life's work. And so because of this, it's like, whoa, space is really opening up for me to be unapologetic and standing in this work. And that says a lot for a scholar, because Drew, you alluded to this. In academia, that is still not a safe, brave space for this work. And so as we are writing our dissertations, we're writing our journal articles, we are the embodiment. So we're not the three of us, and we've talked about this, we're not just scholars. We're not just authors. We're not just teachers. We are spiritualists. We're practitioners. We're the embodiment of the work. So we just don't talk about the work and theorize the work. We're actually living it, doing it, breathing it, and breaking these generational bonds and patterns that a lot of people don't want to see us break, you know? And so even within our own demographic, right? It's something to be said to be like rooted in being a spiritualist, rooted in really doing, not being demonstrative, not being performative, but being authentic in the work. And so my takeaway is that even in those spaces, it's so important for me not to get small, for me not to just put on this theoretical, PhD kind of persona and hat, but to be able to demonstrate all aspects of myself, of my womanhood, because again, academia, even within the, I talk about this sometimes, even with the Black Psychology, Association of Black Psychology, at one point was very male centric, and even a scholarship very male centric. And so even the noticing, the witnessing that Drew saw in terms of, one president, one Black woman president handing over the torch to another Black woman president, and so just Black women being able to show up unapologetically in these spaces and not act and be like men, but be ourselves, be the embodiment of the divine feminine, be the embodiment of the softness, the sensuality, the dance, the rhythm, just all the things that we are, and not having to dumb it down. And so my biggest takeaway for me is to continue to amplify this work, to be unapologetic in the work, to be the scholar and the practitioner and the spiritualist, and do the readings. And so we had a lot of moments between the three of us where we were just, like Medea said, I'm feeling their energy, I'm feeling people's pain, I'm feeling the off-centeredness, and being able to be in this space and actually do healing, and actually sit there and send them energy, actually sit there and help realign the energy in the space just by us being present and standing in our power. And so that has been huge for me, is more confirmation and validation that we have to keep doing it, and we have to be unapologetic, and we have to figure out creative ways of how to marry the scholarship with the actual practice, and be in it, not just be performative ritual, but to really, really be in the work, be in the integrity of the work. And so, Drew, back to you. What was your biggest your takeaway, or how you plan to integrate some of it going forward?
Thank you. Thank you for your share. That's really that resonates a lot. My big takeaway is, and this is something, it's very interesting, because I have a mission statement on my wall, and I also did a lot of work just that kind of captures like how I want to be with my work. And I will say that one thing it reiterated for me is I definitely belong to sort of the tradition of a public intellectual. Very, very clear on that. And what that means for me is I don't really, I love presenting. I get to add this to my list of presentations and places. And so interesting, another colleague reached out to me about 2 conferences just last night when I got home that are coming up, and maybe applying to present there. And I love this idea of presenting. And I also really know that my place where I think I can be most effective is out in the world, right? It's out in the world. So even the things that I'm producing, and I keep saying this, are for the archives more than they are for notoriety. And I'm keeping that front and center. I didn't see a lot of that here, but in general, I just think when it comes to anything that is of the academy, it's really easy to, I was just saying this in a meeting yesterday, that there's a lot of scholars who are famous, and what does that even mean? You know, like, so I take away with me a commitment to being a public intellectual. And I also take away with me two other things. One, what Dr. Butterfly said about our work is our work. So I will not bend myself into strange shapes to change my work, the work of my purpose. And I'm speaking specifically about my dissertation, work that'll live on forever beyond me. That's one thing. And the other thing is that I am very uniquely born of the intersections I'm born of to articulate the very things that I'm articulating. And they're important. And that is, you know, and that is it's a comfort to kind of come away with that, like knowing like, oh, okay, that's the work you're doing. Oh, all right. And for me, it's very much like, oh, I'm so clear on what the work is that I'm doing and the way that I move with it. And we talked a little bit about this. I don't think a lot of people move with academic work in this way. I think it's often very strategic, where in my case, it's very, very emergent, just like my framework encourages people to be. So that it is about living this work in such a way that I notice the flickerings, that I'm attuned. I like what you said, Medea, about my clairs did not turn off, like to stay attuned to the clairs, right? Like what they want to say, what they want us to notice, and what that means for what kind of work I bring through my body, right? Alone or with others. So I come away with a very, very strong sense of what my work is to do. And I think it's really wonderful that I was able to bear witness to others and still be very clear, like, oh, this is how I'm doing this kind of thing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So it's reassuring in that way.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Medea, what about you?
You're on mute.
Okay, you guys can hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
All right, gratitude. One of the major takeaways, after you dropped me off the other day, Kim, because my cousin was asking me all these questions. And I was like, you know, this is stuff mommy and daddy brought me up for. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, like Dr. Francis Cresswell. And I was just looking up who was on leadership at ABPsi, but Francis Cresswell, William, Naeem Akbar, and I feel like one of the major takeaways is how much my mother, who was a 34 plus year special ed teacher for the school district in Philadelphia, these concepts discussed and talked about in ABPsi informed her pedagogy, which informed me, right? And my sisters. That's one of the major takeaways is like, yeah, my mother will be out of her body on the 26th for 6 years. But the major takeaway is like she left me this gift.
Mm.
And then it comes back in the form of you all. Another takeaway was the synchronicities that kept happening for me, the young lady I met. Um, witnessing the embodiment of goddess with Dr. Maria escorting, presenting President-elect Monique to everybody. So, and like that's a part of my life. Like that's part of my presentation, right? Like the mothers ushering in. So, a lot of the takeaways deal with. Um, I already had this. It was just not laying, but it was just dormant somewhere, and I wasn't present to it. And there are literally books on my shelf probably from the 80s side. The 80s side, authors, scholars, and everything. Choose so many synchronicities. Um, Three, a major takeaway is okay, I have to make courses. I have to put work out there. And not for work's sake, as you was bringing up, like not to be famous. No, like spirit is like, I'm about to drag you as you be heard in the view. You created this. I mean, you all may run a workshop, but right now you need to take a portion as it relates to how you came upon this work with your ancestral legacy and just make a small course. So yeah, my takeaway is like I'm motivated. It's time, and it's not time. Yes, it's urgent. However, I am in my divine feminine and goddess energy about how it occurs, and I'm committed. I'm not a member of ABPsi, and I'm not a psychologist. However, as a spiritualist and a person that's been blessed with, gifts that speak directly to spirit. Spirit speaks directly to these gifts. Um, I have a responsibility and a duty to stay present, not just with ABPsi, but places and centers of scholarship that speak about, mind, body, spirit, and the expansion of the human experience and the richness of the human experience
Mhm.
um, on a soul level. So one of my takeaways is like, okay, and I'm gonna be honest with you, how do we get the work that we're seeing at ABPsi across the board? And what it made me think about, because I think about Association of Black Psychology. I'm not trying to change it, but in this world we live in nowadays, in the place where I live, I had me thinking about how to integrate. And I know I've already do it in my source words, actions, and deeds, but these tenets and this reverence and these rituals and practices in, in everyday common spaces. So it had me thinking about that. How do we share this with Americans, per se, in the climate we live in right now? And not share it
Mhm.
to give it, but share it as a healing um, and an enrichment and an empowerment modality.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's my 2 cents.
that is awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And so I want to thank you all for spending time. I think this is really powerful, giving us an opportunity to really share our experiences with the convention and our own personal observations, as well as how we want to integrate and move going forward, how the convention has inspired us. And so the last question is, well, it's not really a question, it's just an opportunity for you to share your current projects. If there's anything that you want the audience to be aware of, any events that you have coming up, I'll just share that. And Drew brought this concept when she says a public intellect or a public scholar, or and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly like the lane that I've been in, that I really want to stay in. And so with that, I have created a public course for Black women, and it is Black and Indigenous women identity, spirit, and spiritualities. It's a certification course, and I'm calling it a certification course because we need to really get clear about who we are, whose we are, where we come from, our ancestral lineages, and the connections, the embodiment of the divine Black mommy as goddess, as sacred, as divinity, as what our ancient ancestors, the ancient of the ancients. And so this is going back. A lot of our history is really, it seems to begin and end at the this transatlantic slave trade. And it's time for us to go back and really do the wisdom and the knowledge in terms of who we are, where we come from, and going back beyond patriarchy, beyond colonization, beyond all of these labels and these ways of being that have completely severed Black women. We have a history. And so getting into the her story of Black women. And so this is what this course is all about. And so I'll have a open house on August 27th. And if you follow me, you'll get the information where you can sign up for the free online open house, so you can learn more about the course syllabus, the books that we'll be diving into, all by Black female scholars. And so I
I
just want
love
to
that.
share that. And so Drew, do you have where are you at in your work?
Yeah. So I'm going to be launching an upcoming a series of conversations with sister colleagues, not really unlike this. Um, and that'll be for 3 months, and it'll be starting in September. I'm also going to be teaching philosophy for a decolonizing yoga program that's local. It's the second time that I'll be doing that. I'm really, really excited about being a part of that project. Because I'm writing my proposal for my dissertation, my Substack will be lit up. I'm committed to writing a lot as I continue to do that work. There will be another Alchemy of Now retreat through the Acosta Institute this year. And there will also be, I'm going to be co-hosting our international conference this year with the Acosta Institute. We do a healing-centered education conference every year. And this year, Maria Tan and I will be the host of it. So I'm very excited about that. And so all of that while parenting and studying. So that's a lot. But yeah, very excited about that. And as you know, I'm really excited to have a home for my work, just because to your point, this can be isolating. And I recognize that I do thrive working in collectives. So really excited about being able to bring my work forward in these ways this upcoming season. This last half of the year, really. I think in terms of Q3.
Yes.
You went on mute at the end, at the very
Just
end.
at the last second.
Oh my gosh, I was going to say what? How long? How? I was just saying. Did you hear me about the collective work?
Yes.
Okay, and then Q3, Q4. Really excited. So that's what's ahead for me.
Awesome. And Medea.
I share gratitude. Currently, I am offering energy work and reading work through the month of August. Something just a small, and small is not the proper word, but an offering to people that may be interested in receiving this. So I'll be doing it through the end of August. Energy healing, reading, intuitive readings, and tarot readings, and sound therapy. So I'll be doing that, and I'm also launching an online course called Knowledge of Self. It's sort of similar to what you're offering, Kim, but the distinction is for everybody. It's called Knowledge of Self Areas of Cultivation Activation, where I'll be supporting people with getting clear around their cultural, social, emotional, physical, and spiritual identities in spaces, and about just how to live a more fulfilled and aligned place, and they can pass that information on to their children. I'm opening it up from anyone that's within high school all the way through adults. So I'll be launching that in September.
Awesome.
And then I'm going to be working on the Sable House at 111 West Street in Virginia, just continuing to uncover the gifts that have been left by my ancestors.
Awesome. So I would like to thank you both for being amazing guests on our Soul to Soul Healing, the podcast. And I am looking forward to your work. And as my audience tunes in, please like and subscribe and reach out to work with either one of these scholar practitioners. If you're interested in any of the work, we'll have details in the comments so you can reach out. So I thank you all, and I thank everyone for tuning in.
Okay, thanks.